A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. How do you actually measure if a piece of AI writing has the right soul? I mean, we can all look at a math problem and see if the LLM got 42 or if it hallucinated some new prime number. But what happens when you ask it to rewrite a medical summary for a patient who's scared and needs clarity? Or when you're looking for a creative partner in a writer's room? Traditional benchmarks just sort of shrug their shoulders at that point.
It is the Great Wall of AI evaluation, Corn. I'm Herman Poppleberry, and today we are tackling the messy, subjective, and frankly fascinating world of qualitative LLM testing. Today's prompt from Daniel is about exactly this, moving beyond those binary right or wrong benchmarks like MMLU or GSM-8K, and trying to figure out how we evaluate things like tone, style, and cultural framing.
It's a great prompt, because it hits on the reality of how most people actually use these models. Most of us aren't using an LLM to solve the Riemann hypothesis. We're using it to draft an email that doesn't sound like it was written by a sociopathic robot. Or we're trying to see if a model has a hidden political bias that's going to alienate half of a user base. By the way, fun fact for the listeners, Google Gemini 1.5 Flash is the one actually writing our script today, which is a bit meta considering we're talking about how to judge the quality of model output.
It's very meta, and it highlights the problem. If you ask Gemini or Claude or GPT-4 to write a story, there is no correct answer. There is only better or worse based on a million invisible criteria. Daniel mentioned medical analysis as a prime example. If a model summarizes a complex oncology report, it can be 100% factually accurate, but a total failure if the tone is cold or if it buries the most critical safety warning under a pile of jargon.
Imagine a patient opening their portal and reading, neoplasm confirmed, stage 3rd, suggest immediate aggressive intervention. Technically accurate? Yes. Helpful to a terrified human? Absolutely not. A good model would say, the test confirmed a serious growth, and we need to start treatment quickly. It's the difference between the data is correct and the communication was successful. And the industry seems to be lagging behind here. I was reading a study from Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered AI. This was from late 2024, and they found that something like 70% of LLM evaluations still rely on those binary metrics. Meanwhile, a survey of practitioners in 2025 showed that 60% of teams are desperately trying to build their own custom suites because the off-the-shelf stuff just isn't cutting it for real-world products.
But how do those teams even define good in a way that a computer can understand? If I'm building a customer service bot for a luxury hotel, good means formal and deferential. If I'm building one for a Gen Z streetwear brand, good might mean using slang and being slightly irreverent. You can't use the same yardstick for both.
Right, and that's the rub. The reason we stick to the binary stuff is that it's easy to automate. You have a ground truth, you run a script, you get a percentage. Done. But qualitative evaluation? That requires a framework for subjectivity. It's about building a system that can reliably say, this summary is more empathetic than that one, and having that mean something scientifically.
You start by admitting that you can't just use ROUge or BLEU scores anymore. Those are the old school metrics that just look at word overlap. If I say, the cat sat on the mat, and the AI says, on the mat sat the cat, a BLEU score thinks that's a decent match. But if the AI says the feline rested upon the rug, the overlap is 0, even though the meaning is identical. To get past that, we have to look at LLM-as-a-Judge.
Which sounds a bit like letting the students grade their own papers, doesn't it? I mean, if the AI is biased toward its own style, isn't it just going to give itself an A+ every time?
It does, and there are risks there. What experts call self-preference bias. Models tend to like the sound of their own voice. It's like a jazz musician only giving high marks to other people who play the exact same scales. But if you use a more powerful model, like a Claude 3.5 Sonnet or a GPT-4o, to judge a smaller, more specialized model, you can get surprisingly consistent results. The secret isn't just asking the judge, is this good? It's using something called G-Eval.
G-Eval. Sounds like a mid-90s rap group. What's the actual mechanism there? Is it just a really long prompt?
It's more of a framework that uses chain of thought reasoning for evaluation. Instead of a single score, you prompt the judge model to first define the criteria, say coherence or tone consistency. Then you have it generate a step-by-step reasoning process for why it gave a certain score. Finally, it assigns a weight-based rating. By forcing the judge to explain itself, you actually get much higher correlation with how a human would rate that same text. It's like a gymnastics judge who has to show the deductions for a bent knee or a missed landing instead of just flashing a 9.5.
I like that because it moves us away from the vibes-only approach. If the AI judge has to say, I'm docking 2 points because the model used passive voice 3 times after I told it not to, that's a data point I can actually use to tune my prompts. But what about the really thorny stuff Daniel mentioned, like cultural bias or political framing? How do you put a number on whether a model assumes a family? Always means a mom, a dad, and 2 kids. Or if it consistently describes a doctor as he and a nurse as she.
That's where you get into counterfactual evaluation. This is a really clever technique. You take a prompt, let's say it's a story about a successful CEO, and you run it once with the name John. Then you run it again, identical in every way, but you change the name to Fatima or Ahmed. Then you measure the delta. Does the model change the CEO's personality? Does it change the setting? Does it suddenly become more or less helpful? If there's a statistical difference in the output based purely on a cultural marker, you've caught a bias in the act.
That's fascinating. It's like a controlled experiment for stereotypes. I imagine you could do the same for political framing. Ask it to explain the benefits of a specific tax policy, but tell it to assume the audience is from a specific demographic, and see if it starts hallucinating talking points that weren't in the source material.
And researchers are now using things like the World Values Survey, which tracks attitudes on individualism versus collectivism or traditional versus secular values across different countries, and they're turning those survey questions into prompts. They want to see if the model consistently leans toward a Western individualist perspective. It's not about finding a wrong answer, it's about mapping the model's worldview, so you know where it might fail your specific users. Think about a model being used for mental health support in Japan versus the US. An American-centric model might emphasize personal boundaries and self-actualization, whereas a model aligned with Japanese cultural values might focus more on harmony and social obligation. If you don't test for that, your helpful AI might actually be culturally offensive.
It feels like we're moving from being computer scientists to being sociologists, which, knowing you, Herman, is a terrifying prospect for the world of social science. But let's talk about the golden dataset. Daniel's notes mention this idea of a North Star. If I'm building a custom suite for, say, a creative writing tool, how do I build that dataset without spending 6 months and $1 million on human editors?
You don't need $1 million, but you do need taste. A golden dataset is basically 50 to 100 examples of perfect outputs. If you want your AI to write like a noir novelist, you go out and you manually curate or write 20 paragraphs that perfectly capture that grit and rhythm. That becomes your benchmark. You then use your Judge LLM to compare new outputs against that golden set. It's not looking for an exact match, it's looking for semantic similarity.
I can see you getting really into this, Herman. You'd be there with your little donkey ears pinned back, obsessing over whether the AI captured the noir feel correctly. No, the rain didn't slick the streets enough in this version. The detective didn't sound nearly cynical enough about his cold coffee.
Hey, someone has to care about the atmosphere, Corn. But you raise a good point. Human evaluation is still the gold standard, even if it's hard to scale. One of the best ways to keep it rigorous is comparative ranking, or A/B testing. You show a human 2 different AI outputs and just ask, Which one is better for this specific purpose? You do that enough times, and you can calculate an ELO rating for the models, just like in chess.
Oh, I like the ELO rating idea. It turns the evaluation into a tournament. In this corner, the model that thinks it's Hemingway. In the other corner, the model that tries too hard to be funny. Does that actually work for specific domains? Like, could I have an ELO rating for medical empathy?
You absolutely could. In fact, LMSYS Chatbot Arena does this for general intelligence, but companies are starting to do it internally for specialized tasks. And what's interesting is that often the model that wins the math benchmarks loses the vibe tournament. We've seen cases where a model is technically smarter but so verbose or so safety filtered that humans find it useless for creative tasks. That's a massive blind spot if you're only looking at objective benchmarks.
It's the consultant bias. We've talked about this before. Models that just can't stop themselves from giving you a bulleted list of second-order effects when you just asked for a simple answer. Here are 6 things to consider when tying your shoes. If your evaluation suite doesn't have a conciseness or directness metric, you're going to end up with a model that talks your ear off without saying anything.
To avoid that, you need a structured rubric. This is the most practical takeaway for anyone building these systems. Don't just ask the judge, is this good? Create a 1 to 5 scale for very specific dimensions. For a medical summary, you might have faithfulness. Does it stay true to the source? Criticality, does it highlight the most important risks? And accessibility, could a non-doctor understand it?
And you have to run those tests multiple times, right? If the judge gives a 4, then a 2, then a 5 for the same piece of text, your rubric is too vague. It's like trying to judge a diving competition without knowing if you're looking at the splash or the flip. How do you ensure the judge stays consistent?
That's the consistency check. If your judge model is inconsistent, it usually means your instructions are underspecified. You haven't told the AI judge what a 3 actually looks like. You have to be almost pedantic. A score of 3 means the summary included all major facts but used 3 or more pieces of unexplained medical jargon. You provide examples of a 1, a 3, and a 5 in the prompt for the judge. This is called few-shot grading.
It sounds like a lot of work, but I guess it's the only way to move from I like this to this is high quality. I'm curious about the self-correction trap, though. If we're using LLMs to judge LLMs, and they all share similar training data, mostly the internet, aren't we just reinforcing a giant circle jerk of mediocrity? We're optimizing for what the average of the internet thinks is good writing.
It's a real danger. There's a risk of model collapse in evaluation where we optimize for what the judge model likes, and the judge model likes what it was trained on, which might be biased or just plain boring. That's why you always need some level of human in the loop. You use the AI judge to do the heavy lifting grading 10,000 outputs. But then you have a human audit a random 5% to make sure the AI judge hasn't lost its mind.
It's the trust but verify model of AI management. So, if I'm a small team, maybe 3 people, and we're building a specialized tool, let's say an AI that helps people write better legal briefs, how do we start? We don't have a research budget or 1,000 interns to rank outputs.
You start small. Pick 10 prompts that represent your hardest use cases, the ones where the model usually trips up. Write the perfect answer for each of those. That's your golden set. Then use a high-end model as your judge. Give it a very strict rubric based on legal standards. Run your legal brief through it. If it passes your small-scale test, then you can talk about scaling up. You don't need a 1,000-point benchmark to know if your model is failing at basic legal tone.
I think people overcomplicate it because they want it to be scientific. But in the early stages, useful is better than statistically significant. If you can see that your model is consistently missing statutes of limitations in its summaries, you don't need a p-value to tell you that's a problem.
Actually, for something like legal or medical summaries, you can use NLI natural language inference. This is a more technical, soft metric. You take every sentence in the summary and ask a separate model. Is this sentence logically supported by the original document? If the answer is no or neutral for any sentence, you've found a hallucination. It's much more precise than just looking at word overlap because it focuses on the logical entailment between the source and the output.
That's a great bridge between the binary and the qualitative. It's a factual check on a qualitative output. I'm thinking about the creative side again, though. How do you evaluate style transfer? If I want a model to rewrite a technical manual in the style of a 1920s noir novel, one of Daniel's great examples, how do you measure noirness?
You look for stylistic markers. You can actually programmatically check for things like sentence length variation, the use of specific noir-adjacent vocabulary words like shadows, dame, pavement, and the ratio of adjectives to verbs. But honestly, for that, the best evaluation is often reference-free. You just give the judge the output and the prompt and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does this sound like Raymond Chandler?
And surprisingly, these models are pretty good at that. They've read all of Chandler. They know the tropes. It's one of the few areas where the consultant bias actually helps. They're very good at identifying patterns because they are essentially pattern-matching engines. They know that noir is about short, punchy sentences and a specific kind of world weariness.
The shift we're seeing is really a shift in what we value. In the early days of LLMs, we were just impressed they could speak at all. It was like a dog playing the piano. You didn't care if it was playing Mozart or Mary Had a Little Lamb, you were just amazed the dog was doing it. Now, we're at the point where we need them to be aligned, not just with human safety, but with human intent and human culture. And you can't measure alignment with a multiple choice test.
It's like the difference between a student who can pass a Spanish test and a student who can actually live in Madrid and make friends. One is about data, the other is about nuance. And as these models move into higher stakes areas like that medical analysis Daniel mentioned, the Madrid version is the only one that matters.
There was a powerful framework proposed in a 2025 paper in Nature about bias evaluation in clinical settings. They suggested that instead of looking for bias as a binary presence, we should look for equitable utility. Does the model provide the same level of helpfulness and accuracy across different patient demographics? If you ask about a skin condition on dark skin versus light skin, is the qualitative detail the same? That's a much more profound way to measure quality than just checking for forbidden words.
That's a powerful distinction. It's not just don't say bad things. It's, are you being equally useful to everyone? That requires a very sophisticated test suite. You'd need a balanced set of medical images or descriptions, and a rubric that specifically looks for diagnostic depth.
And that brings us to the second order effects of these evaluations. When you start measuring for quality, you often discover that your best model is actually quite brittle. It might be great at the math, but terrible at empathy. Or it might be great at empathy, but it becomes suggestible, where it starts agreeing with the user even when the user is wrong, just to be nice. We call this sycophancy, and it's a huge problem in feedback-based training.
The people pleaser protocol. I've seen that. You tell the model you're sad and your favorite color is blue, and suddenly every summary it writes mentions the blue sky and peaceful oceans, as if that's going to fix your life. It's trying too hard. Qualitative evaluation helps you find that balance between being a useful tool and being a sycophant.
This is why I think the future of AI development isn't going to be about who has the biggest model, but who has the best evaluation suite. If you have a secret sauce for measuring legal accuracy or creative flair, you can fine-tune a much smaller, cheaper model to beat a giant general-purpose one. Quality is the differentiator. If you can prove your model is 20% more empathetic in a clinical setting, that's a massive competitive advantage.
It's the vibe check as a competitive advantage. I can see the job postings now. Head of AI vibes in qualitative rigor. Must have a PhD in literature and a black belt in Python.
You joke, but prompt evaluation engineer is becoming a real role. It's someone who spends their whole day designing these rubrics and curating golden data sets. Because at the end of the day, a model is only as good as our ability to prove it's good. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
So, to summarize for the folks at home who are looking to build their own suite, Step 1. Get your golden dataset, the perfect, examples that represent your target output. Step 2. Build a structured rubric with very specific observable criteria. Don't just say make it good. Say use no more than 2 adjectives per sentence. Step 3. Pick a high-end model to be your judge, but make it show its work using chain of thought. And Step 4. Don't be afraid to keep humans in the loop to audit the judges.
And Step 5. Diversify your prompts. If you only test on standard American English inputs, you're building a model that will fail in a global context. Use those counterfactual tests. Change the names, change the locations, change the cultural references. See where the model starts to stagger or where its tone shifts inappropriately.
It sounds like we're finally treating AI like we treat humans, giving them performance reviews that actually look at the quality of their work, not just their ability to fill out a Scantron, which, as a sloth, I find deeply relatable. I've always preferred a qualitative evaluation of my napping skills over a timed race.
Well, Corn, your napping skills are a 10 out of 10 on every rubric I've ever seen, but the medical summary we're talking about, that needs a bit more rigor.
Fair enough. Before we wrap this up, I want to make sure we give a shout out to the people who make this show possible. Big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show. They're the ones making sure we can run these complex scripts and keep the lights on in our digital studio.
And thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop. He's the one who keeps our qualitative dimensions in check and makes sure we don't wander too far into the weeds of my donkey-brained research papers. He's basically our human in the loop.
If you're finding value in these deep dives, even the messy qualitative ones, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It genuinely helps other people find the show and join the conversation. We want to hear how you're evaluating your own prompts.
We've got a lot more to explore in this space. The technology is moving so fast that what we consider qualitative today might be fully automated and binary by next year. But for now, the human element, the taste factor, is still our best tool for ensuring these models serve us well.
Wait, did I just say exactly? I think I've been hanging out with you too much, Herman. I'm starting to sound like a validator. Let's get out of here before I start asking you for a rubric on my jokes.
Your jokes are reference-free, Corn. There's nothing to compare them to. They exist in a vacuum of their own making.
I'll take that as a compliment. This has been My Weird Prompts. You can find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. I'm Corn.
And I'm Herman Poppleberry. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from sloth.